If you think you've heard every crazy crime story before, you haven't heard this one. Hit subscribe because what happened after this 911 call will keep you up tonight. At 2:17 a.m. on April 9, 2019, the Lincoln County Dispatch Center received a call that still haunts every officer who was on shift that night. A woman's voice, terrified, shaky, but controlled, came through the line. "There's someone in my house," she whispered. The dispatcher, a veteran operator named Sandra Torres, immediately began standard protocol. "Ma'am, what's your name?" A pause. Then, barely audible, "Emily Hartman." The line crackled with static. Sandra heard footsteps. Emily whispered again, "He's downstairs. I can hear him." And then, the sound that no one ever forgets, the crash of glass, a sharp inhale, and a scream. The call ended with the sound of running water. Officers were dispatched within 3 minutes. They arrived at 214 Redwood Lane, a two-story colonial-style home on the outskirts of Lincoln Falls, Virginia. The house sat alone at the edge of a wooded ravine. The front door was wide open, a trail of muddy footprints leading inside. The living room was in disarray, couch overturned, lamp shattered. But there was no sign of forced entry. The only strange thing was that every light in the house had been turned off except for one, the kitchen sink light, flickering. Detective Nate Adler, lead on the case, remembered the silence most of all. It didn't feel like a break-in. It felt staged. In the kitchen, police found a phone on the floor, Emily's, the screen still lit up with a 911 log. The back door was locked from the inside. Upstairs, the master bedroom was undisturbed. No blood, no signs of a struggle. But on the nightstand was something that made every investigator stop. A handwritten note in black marker. "I told you he was watching." By dawn, the property was sealed off as a crime scene. Emily's husband, David Hartman, returned from an overnight business trip in Richmond. He pulled up to a street filled with flashing lights and reporters. When officers informed him of the situation, he looked stunned but calm, almost too calm according to witnesses. There must be a mistake. Emily was supposed to be at her sister's. Except she wasn't. Detectives quickly discovered that Emily had canceled dinner plans with her sister earlier that evening. According to her sister's phone records, Emily texted at 7:04 p.m. "Not feeling great tonight. David's been off lately. Just want to rest." It was the last message anyone received from her. That morning, a forensic sweep turned up a few puzzling details. In the backyard, shoe prints led toward the tree line, two distinct pairs. One was Emily's size, the other much larger. Both sets stopped abruptly 10 feet into the woods, as if the people had vanished. Then, in the kitchen sink, investigators found something else. A wedding ring. Emily's. It was resting in the drain, slick with soap. Detective Adler began reconstructing Emily's last 24 hours. Friends described her as steady, private, the kind of person who didn't panic. She worked part-time at a local insurance office and volunteered at an animal shelter. But over the past few weeks, she had started confiding in a coworker that she felt watched. Her coworker, Rachel Fields, told police Emily had mentioned a man in a gray hoodie showing up in different places, outside her work, at the grocery store, once even parked down the street from her home. Rachel said Emily told her, "David thinks I'm imagining it." That line stuck with Adler, because when police questioned David Hartman, his version of events didn't match what they knew. David claimed he'd left for Richmond around 6 and checked into a hotel by 9, but surveillance footage from the highway toll booth showed his car heading back toward Lincoln Falls at 10:41 p.m. When detectives confronted him, David insisted he had forgotten something important at home, but he couldn't remember what that was. And there was something else. The hotel security camera footage that night didn't show David entering until 12:56 a.m., 2 hours and 15 minutes unaccounted for. At this point, Emily's disappearance had gone viral. News stations ran the audio from her 911 call, blurring the scream at the end. Online sleuths dissected every sound. Some claimed you could hear whispering before the line went dead. Others pointed out what sounded like running water, maybe from the kitchen sink where her ring was found. But one retired dispatcher noticed something chilling. In the background of the call, just before the scream, you could faintly hear a man's voice say one word: "Enough." The audio was sent for forensic enhancement. In the meantime, Adler secured a warrant to re-examine the Hartman house. This time, they brought cadaver dogs. The animals led officers to the basement. There, behind the furnace, they found a hidden crawl space covered by plywood. Inside were 3 objects: an old flip phone, a pair of women's sneakers, and a digital voice recorder. The phone and shoes matched Emily's, but the recorder was new. Adler pressed play. At first, only static. Then, faint breathing. Then Emily's voice, trembling. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" A man's voice replied, calm and almost gentle. "You should never have called." Then a loud thud. The recording stopped. That night, David Hartman was taken in for questioning. He denied everything, said he had no idea where the recorder came from. But when the tech team traced the voice recorder's serial number, they found it had been purchased online 2 weeks earlier, using David's credit card. Still, there was no body, no clear evidence of foul play. Without it, prosecutors couldn't charge him. Adler was furious. He said later, "We had the motive, the means, and the fear, but no proof she was dead." That changed 4 days later. A jogger on the west side of Lincoln Falls reported a burnt-out car deep in the woods near Old Mill Creek. It was a 2017 Toyota Camry, registered to Emily Hartman. Inside, investigators found melted debris, a torn piece of duct tape, and strands of long brown hair stuck to the headrest. DNA confirmed it was Emily's. But what made everyone's blood run cold wasn't what they found inside. It was what was missing. The driver's seat was adjusted all the way back, far too far for Emily's 5'4" frame, and on the inside of the windshield, drawn in the soot with a finger, were 2 words: "I know." Detective Adler stepped back from the wreck, the smell of char still in the air. He looked at the words, at the ring still sealed in evidence back at the lab, and said quietly, "This wasn't just murder. This was a message." But who was it for? That night, Adler got a call from the tech team. They had enhanced the final seconds of the 911 audio. There were 3 voices, not 2. Emily, a man, and a third voice whispering something almost inaudible. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a threat. It was a name. By the time the sun rose over Lincoln Falls the next morning, the case of Emily Hartman had stopped being a disappearance. It had become a full-scale homicide investigation. Detective Nate Adler stood in the forensics lab staring at the transcript of the enhanced 911 call. The tech report was clear. The third voice had spoken the name David. It wasn't shouted, wasn't panicked. It was whispered, softly, deliberately. Adler played the clip again, the faint words echoing through the speakers. "David." He turned to the audio technician. "Could that have been Emily?" The technician shook his head. "Different pitch, male voice, close to the mic, like they were leaning in." Adler leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "So she called 911, someone attacks her, another man says her husband's name right before she screams, 'That's not random, that's personal.'" That morning, police obtained a search warrant for David Hartman's laptop and home office. He protested the entire time. "You're wasting your time," he said. "I didn't hurt Emily." But when digital forensics began examining his devices, things got dark fast. On his external hard drive were multiple encrypted folders labeled projects and clients. When the tech team cracked them open, they didn't find spreadsheets or client invoices. They found dozens of video files, footage of people's houses shot from outside windows at night. The timestamps spanned nearly a year. Each file was labeled with an address. One of them, 214 Redwood Lane, their own house. Adler froze as he watched the footage. The camera panned slowly across Emily's face as she sat in the living room, unaware she was being filmed. It zoomed in on her phone, her hands trembling slightly. Another clip showed her sleeping, the frame swaying slightly as if handheld. The most recent video was time-stamped just 2 nights before she disappeared. In it, Emily was standing by the sink, washing dishes. She glanced toward the camera, just once, as if she sensed it. Then the video abruptly ended. Adler's jaw clenched. He was spying on her in his own house. But there was more. In another folder, David had saved screenshots of text conversations between Emily and a contact saved as unknown. The text started friendly enough. "You don't deserve to be treated like that." Then grew darker. "He's lying to you, and I can make it stop." The final message, timestamped 10:12 p.m. the night Emily disappeared, simply read, "Tonight, it ends." By now, the FBI had joined the investigation. They subpoenaed phone records from the unknown number. It was a prepaid burner, untraceable, but they did find one surprising link. It had pinged off a cell tower near Old Mill Creek, the same area where Emily's burned car was found. Meanwhile, David was still denying everything. During his second interview, he maintained the same story. "I left for Richmond at 6, I came back to grab my watch, then I drove straight back to the hotel." Detective Adler leaned forward. "You expect me to believe you forgot your watch and drove 180 miles in the middle of the night to get it?" David's composure cracked slightly. "You don't understand her. She was paranoid. She had been seeing things, hearing things that weren't there. She said people were following her. She called the cops twice last month for nothing." "Then why were you filming her?" Adler shot back. "Filming? What are you talking about?" When Adler showed him the footage, David's face drained of color. "That's not me," he whispered. "Someone planted that. Emily was being watched, but it wasn't me." "Who then?" David's voice broke. "Ask the man she was seeing." The words hit the room like a bullet. David explained that for months, he believed Emily was having an affair. He said she had become secretive, started locking her phone, leaving the house late at night. "I confronted her about it," he said. "She said I was crazy, but I know what I saw. She was meeting someone." Detective Adler didn't believe him, but they checked Emily's phone logs anyway. And there it was. A number saved under R. Lee. Dozens of texts over the past few weeks. Most were harmless. "You okay? Same time tomorrow? Be careful." But one stood out, sent just hours before the 911 call. "He's getting worse. I don't feel safe." R. Lee was Ryan Lee, a local contractor who'd done renovation work on the Hartman's property last fall. When detectives brought him in, he looked shocked to even be questioned. "Emily? No, we weren't involved like that. She called me a few times because she thought someone was messing with her security cameras. I just helped her reset them." Adler frowned. "Did she tell you who she thought it was?" Ryan hesitated. "Yeah, she said she thought it was David." He then mentioned something that made the whole room go quiet. "The night she disappeared, she called me." Ryan's call records confirmed it. One missed call from Emily at 2:16 a.m., 1 minute before the 911 call. He hadn't answered because he was asleep. When asked if he knew anything about the messages from unknown, Ryan shook his head. She mentioned someone texting her weird things, but she said she didn't know who it was. The investigators cross-referenced the burner phone with local purchases. Out of thousands of records, one stood out. A single prepaid phone purchased at a gas station on Route 9, 30 minutes from Lincoln Falls. Security footage from that night showed a man in a baseball cap paying in cash. When the cashier was interviewed, she remembered him clearly. "Yeah, tall guy wearing a blue jacket. I remember because he bought gas, a burner phone, and a pack of matches." Adler showed her a photo lineup. She pointed immediately. "Yeah, that's him. That's David Hartman." The following day, police arrested David. The evidence was mounting. The hidden videos, the burner phone purchase, the strange messages, the car in the woods. But David refused to talk. He only asked one question. "Did you find the camera?" "What camera?" Adler asked. "The one she hid." That was the first they'd heard of a second recording device. When detectives searched the house again, they found nothing new, until a tech specialist scanned the property with an RF detector. Behind a painting in the upstairs hallway, they found a tiny motion-activated camera, battery-operated, still recording. They pulled the footage. The video shows the night of April 8th, the night Emily vanished. She's pacing in the hallway, phone in hand, whispering into it. The audio is faint, but you can make out fragments. "I'm sure." "He's watching again. I can't stay here. She moves toward the stairs, and for a split second, someone else steps into frame. A man in a gray hoodie, face obscured. He reaches out, the camera shakes violently, then goes dark. The timestamp, 2:14 a.m., just 3 minutes before her 911 call. When Adler showed David the footage, he looked stunned. "That's not me," he said, voice trembling. "I swear to God that's not me." But here is where things got truly strange. The tech team analyzed the hoodie man's height and build. He was taller than David, broader shoulders, and when they enhanced the reflection from a window, they caught something faint but unmistakable, a symbol on the hoodie's sleeve. It was the logo of Stanton's Security Systems, the same company that had installed the Hartmans' home alarms 6 months earlier. Adler pulled the company's employment list. One name stood out immediately: Mark Hanley, a former security technician fired in 2018 for stalking a female client. And guess who that client was? Emily Hartman. Detective Adler sat back, stunned. It was starting to make sense. The missing hours, the mysterious unknown texts, the shadow Emily kept seeing. But if Hanley was behind the stalking, what did David know? That night, Adler received a voicemail. No caller ID, just a single line spoken in a whisper. "You're looking for the wrong husband." Then the line went dead.
It had been 19 days since Emily Hartman's 911 call. The media storm was relentless. News vans lined the quiet cul-de-sac, reporters shouting over one another, desperate for updates on the wife who called for help and vanished. But inside Lincoln County PD, Detective Nate Adler wasn't sleeping. The case had turned into a puzzle with edges that didn't fit: a husband with a motive, a stalker with access, and a voice whispering David seconds before the line went dead. At 3:42 a.m., Adler sat alone in the evidence room, replaying that 911 call for the 1,000th time. Emily's breath, the footsteps, the crash, the whisper, David. And then, that faint running water. That sound had been dismissed early in the investigation, assumed to be the kitchen sink. But Adler couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't water. It was something else. He turned up the volume, filtering out static. The pattern wasn't continuous. It pulsed, rhythmic, mechanical, almost like a recording device rewinding. "Jesus," Adler whispered. Someone was recording the call. The next morning, the FBI cyber unit confirmed it. The 911 call had been intercepted, duplicated through a remote line tap placed somewhere in Emily's home network. Whoever attacked her had been monitoring her calls in real time. The trace led back to an IP address registered under a maintenance server, Stanton Security Systems. And the technician responsible for managing that region's client database? Mark Hanley. Adler didn't wait. He drove straight to Stanton's old headquarters, now an abandoned brick building off Route 6. Inside, the power was still on, emergency lights humming faintly. He found a makeshift workstation covered in dust, monitors, cables, stacks of old DVR units, and something that made his stomach drop: a small external hard drive labeled in black marker, H214. 214 Redwood Lane, Emily's house. He plugged it into his laptop. The drive contained hundreds of hours of footage, not just of Emily, but of multiple homes, clients, women, all filmed through hidden cameras installed inside security systems. But one folder was different. It was named Dinner. The first video file began with the date, April 8, 2019, 9:02 p.m. The footage showed Emily sitting at her kitchen table, nervously tapping her fingers. She kept glancing toward the window. Then she picked up her phone and dialed someone. "David, please call me back. I don't feel safe." She hung up, stood, and walked toward the sink, just as a faint creak echoed from the hallway. She froze. In the reflection of the microwave door, you could see movement, a man's silhouette entering the kitchen, wearing a gray hoodie. Emily turned slowly. "Why are you here?" she whispered. The man didn't answer. He stepped closer. The camera's angle caught his profile for a second, enough for Adler's stomach to tighten. It wasn't Mark Hanley. It was David Hartman. Adler slammed his fist on the desk. David had lied about everything: the hotel, the trip, the footage, the texts, but the question was why he'd pretend to be the stalker his wife feared. He scanned the next file, time-stamped 2:13 a.m. It showed the same kitchen, dark now, only the flickering light above the sink. Emily crept into frame, phone in hand. Her voice trembled. "There's someone in my house." Adler froze. It was the live recording of her 911 call from inside the house. The man's shadow appeared in the doorway. Emily gasped, backing away. Then, from behind her, another figure stepped out, taller, wearing a darker jacket. Two men. David and Mark Hanley. Emily turned toward the camera, terrified. "Please, you don't have to do this." David's voice was calm. "It's the only way." Hanley whispered something indecipherable, then reached for her. The image shook violently before cutting out. Adler sat back, his throat dry. This wasn't just a domestic murder. It was a collaboration, a setup. When the footage was enhanced, it confirmed what Emily likely discovered too late. Her husband and the man she thought was stalking her were working together. Hanley had been fired from Stanton 2 years earlier for harassment, but the connection didn't end there. He and David had met through an online forum called Reclaim Order, a private group where disillusioned men posted surveillance projects and traded videos of their partners. Adler's team traced financial transactions between the two men. David had been paying Hanley monthly for consulting. In reality, Hanley had helped install hidden cameras throughout the Hartman home. But something changed that last month. Emily had begun noticing the cameras. She'd planned to go to police. The final payment David sent Hanley, labeled "Finish It," was wired 2 days before her disappearance. That afternoon, Adler confronted David in his holding cell. "You wanted her to think she was losing her mind," Adler said. "The texts from unknown, the noises, the shadows, all you. You hired Hanley to stalk your own wife." David looked up slowly. "She ruined me," he said quietly. "She was going to take everything." "So you killed her?" David smiled faintly. "You really think I'd do that myself?" Adler's blood ran cold. "Hanley." David leaned forward, eyes hollow. "We made a deal. He wanted her. I wanted her gone." Hours later, a state trooper called in from Old Mill Creek where Emily's burned car had been found. Search teams expanding the perimeter had found something buried beneath a layer of leaves and ash, a half-melted camera casing. Inside was a micro SD card. When investigators restored the data, they found one video file, partially corrupted but salvageable. The footage showed a dark wooded area, headlights flickering. Emily's voice could be heard crying, "Please, I'll do whatever you want." Then Hanley's voice. "He said no one would find you here." A pause. Then another voice, David's, cold, distant. "Make it look like she ran." The sound of ignition, a scream, and then fire. 2 days later, SWAT raided an abandoned farmhouse 30 miles north of Lincoln Falls. Hanley had been hiding there. Inside, they found surveillance monitors still running, feeds from multiple homes. And in the basement, a chair with restraints bolted to the floor. But Hanley was gone. A window had been smashed from the inside, blood on the glass, a trail into the woods, then nothing. David Hartman was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction, and evidence tampering. But without Hanley, there was no full closure. Then, 3 months later, the story took one final turn. Detective Adler was at his desk late one night when a package arrived unmarked. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "You missed something." The video began with static, then showed Emily sitting at her kitchen table. The timestamp, April 8th, 10:55 p.m. She looked directly into the camera, terrified but composed. "If anyone finds this, my name is Emily Hartman. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. David's not who he says he is. There's someone else with him. He calls him Mark. I think they're planning something tonight." She hesitated, looking toward the stairs. "He's home." Then she picked up her phone and whispered, "911." The recording ended. The video was genuine, metadata verified, no edits. Emily had found one of the hidden cameras and used it to record her own message. The tragedy was that she never had time to send it. When the video aired nationally, it reignited the case. Public outrage surged. The FBI renewed the manhunt for Mark Hanwe. And then, 1 year later, a hunter in rural Pennsylvania reported finding a tattered gray hoodie hanging from a branch deep in the forest, with a silver keychain engraved H214. The DNA matched Handley's, but his body was never found. In an interview years later, Detective Adler admitted something that still haunted him. "When we reviewed the audio from that last file, we found a faint echo just before she says her name. It wasn't feedback. It was another voice in the background, repeating her words. The analysts enhanced it. It whispered, barely audible, 'If anyone finds this.'" Adler's voice trembled. It was her own voice, echoing. They later discovered that the signal had been looping, transmitting through the house's intercom system for over an hour that night, as if she already knew what was coming and wanted to make sure someone heard. No one did. In 2022, the Hartman house was sold to a new family. A week after moving in, the new owner called police to report something odd. The kitchen light kept flickering every night at 2:17 a.m. When an electrician inspected the wiring, he found a hidden junction box behind the wall, containing an old recording device. It was still powered. The file on it was labeled